Major General Mahajan, thank you for the warm welcome. Members of the Patwardhan family, I'm very delighted to be here and thank you for the honor. Distinguished officers, serving officers, students, I think we are going to make you stand for the next 1 hour. And I think more importantly, the gracious warmth that this city always has, the city of thinkers. So I generally believe, looking at the serving officers here, this is a city of both defense and offense. With thinkers, you can't not have offense. So I look forward to some of that after I finish my speech. It'll be lovely to have some rebuttals and interjections as well. And I think more importantly, from what I read about why this lecture series has been actually started, I think thank you, Anand, for that introduction. So I'm what I call the wrong sandwich generation. So I use everything digital. So my notes, I'm not what I call a very native speaker. There are people who have gift of the gab, who can speak for hours without notes. I don't have that luxury, so I have my notes present here. And it's also very important, right? I mean, you're standing in the midst of some of these strategic experts, and when you're not one, what would you talk to somebody who already knows more about Iran, Israel, especially when they've been there? And that's a context and that's a challenge which makes it far more interesting for people like me. I come from the corporate world and the think tank world, intersection of corporate and think tank. So why am I qualified to stand here? Very simple. Corporate guys, we understand how to cover our risks. War is not a zero-sum game. For a country, it's a zero-sum game. But for the corporate, I can't lose. I have shareholders. I have to make money out of anything. So which means that we look at risks very, very differently than, let's say, a defense expert would look at risk. I think with that context, so I stand here without the burden of defense experts, but with the lens of what corporates think of war and risks. Very simple. Bulk of Indian oil comes through the territory where the disputes are happening today. There's a cost attached to it. And does it mean that we will stop our economy? Not really. Just an hour ago, RBI maintained rates. There's a context that I'll get there. So my perspectives would seem coming out of chain of command, if I can say so, but with a layer that all of us, in a sense, are participants in the larger Indian economic story. I think the very fact that Indian economy is far more celebrated today makes this far more important. So let me start with a big thank you to the man who's so important to what's happening currently in the world. Because suddenly we all as experts start thinking about the phrase called unknown unknowns. So which means if you're doing any scenario planning, whether in corporate boardrooms or global strategic affairs, suddenly that unknown risk plays up. There's a premium to it. And if the Nobel Peace Committee had actually awarded the Peace Prize to President Trump, I think the speech itself would have been redundant today. So I think I'm first acknowledging that there is a big variable in this entire conversation, President Trump. I think without that, this conversation won't even proceed further. Both sides of the spectrum, Iran and Israel, and now of late India, Trump is very, very important. He's become somebody very, very unpredictable, including his own core teams are not able to predict what he might say, because suddenly Truth Social is what we all watch for, not necessarily White House press statements. There's a context of how diplomacy has changed, shifted. So let's start by talking about what does it mean for India, both strategically and economically. End of the day, even to fight strategic wars, you need economics. The context of economics of war has changed. What war means has changed. It's not just about arms and ammunition. Almost everything. We are seeing that the trade tariffs are also weaponizing the economy. So I want to connect war, geopolitical supremacy, what I would call as the military-industrial complex is changing completely. Technology. I mean, you would remember very famously, Iran wanted citizens not to use WhatsApp and to delete it from their phones. And there's a reason for it, because it believed that Israel was actually figuring out the locations of its citizens and attacking them. So Let's start with the history and geography of both these economies, because I think it's very important. Generally, we think history is either boring or it's all stories. But history tells a lot about us. For example, a memorial series like this itself is actually celebrating history because it's a context. For all the youngsters today, content seems to be the king, right? We say content is the king or content is the queen. But without context, content has no meaning. If I suddenly start reciting the recently concluded India-England test match scores, I might have content, but there's no context for it. So I might sound very, very silly. So the fact is, history and geography give us a lot of context to whatever we do, however we behave. Classic thing, how many of you here relate to yourself as middle class? Middle class Indians. Everybody, right? And this is exactly what I recently wrote about. Almost all of us very intuitively say we are middle class because it is denoting our value system, not wealth anymore. And most of us are actually not middle class by wealth. We are more than middle class. We have a car, we probably own a house. We are not middle class at all. We are 1% of Indian in terms of wealth. But yet intuitively we will say we are middle class, this is the value system. Is there a defined code in law, regulations, anything? Nothing. It's just a context that we say we are middle class. I call it the bragging rights. It's almost like a badge of honor. I'm middle class. Probably somebody, one of you should make a t-shirt out of it. It might sell well. I'm middle class. Why am I saying this? I think people, a generation of people, Iranians, Israelis have grown up with certain feeling about one another. No different from India, Pakistan. No different from probably Tamil and Sri Lanka. There is a context. So, how many of you actually know that Iran and Israel were actually one time close friends? For all the youngsters there, if I use the word called Persepolis, you won't even know what we are talking about. Because all your context is the recent war. The fact is that you have to go back before 1979, that the two countries had a tie. It could have been a very informal tie. Intelligence was shared. Trade happened between the two countries. And I think again the common pact, somebody who came in and changed the entire relationship according to me, is the US. The US has been very, very active in the region for a very, very long time. And if you, all of us remember the infamous Shah of Iran party, the Grand Party, and then the subsequent downfall of it. But we don't remember all the celebrations that the two countries had until 1979. 79, you also had the Islamic Revolution happening in one side of the fence. And I call it the proxy theaters. And subsequently, today, Iran and Israel have different proxy theaters that's blowing it itself out. Even today, Israel has its own challenges with various parties. Politically, even the domestic politics is now playing up, probably wanting to come together. And I think wars and strifes hurt all of us. Is it over? No. I think the last US entering this entire Iran-Israel war recently has only strengthened their actual internal rigidity. If at all anything, the rebels in the last 3 weeks have completely disappeared. You talk about the common man, I don't know how many of you actually read Tehran Times. It'll be interesting if you actually do. The interviews with the common man, the photographs, the videos that they put out in those, it looks as if there is no war, no attack, nothing has happened at all. It is no different probably how we all behaved, except that we were glued to the television a couple of weeks ago when the entire India-Pakistan skirmishes were happening, and I wouldn't want to use that as war. But how did we all behave? Nothing changed for us. We watched it on TV and we would, all of us are Twitter commentators, right? We would have said, go hammer them, do this. Our life gets over. We think we are the Twitter armchair experts today. So what do I want to bring that to is very simple. The world view gets institutionalized also by social media. There's a huge narrative of social media that makes us form opinions without actual basis. Our content curation happens very, very far away, because if you ask any of the serving army officer, they will not be able to comment on what's happening on the ground. We also saw that the official handles in the briefings that happened. Well, some of us might disagree with it could have been better or any of those, but let's leave it to whoever is running those mandates, because they understand the pressures. But I want to also come back to, and we have an Israeli expert here, and I want to point out that Israel from 1948 has fought multiple wars, has endured waves of terrorism, constantly navigated hostile borders. I think I can replace the word Israel with India. It will be very similar. And that's why we also understand and almost share a kind of a emotional pact with Israel, because we have navigated and we are continuing to navigate similar waters. The Western world, especially Europe, in the last few years, understands the concept of refugee migration. Well, nobody told them about India. For how many decades we've been having it across our borders. And even if it did, the UN has not ever passed a single resolution standing up for Indian right. And of course, despite that, India would believe in multilateralism. But all it has taken is one single president, Trump, saying that I'm not going to pay up anymore for multilateralism. I'm going to dismantle everything. Climate change, I don't believe in. And every time he says I don't believe in climate change, suddenly DC gets flooded, New York gets flooded, there's a heat wave that destroys and burns up half of LA. And yet, there's a kind of disbelief. What does it mean for political culture? I think we live in an era where civilians, as political leaders, the roles and rights bestowed by their own constitution, I mean, we are a democracy. But the reality is, we are also bound by the code of honor. Politicians decide even the chain of command in active engagements that we have. Which is why track 2 events, some of you are familiar with track 2. These are informal conversations that two countries have invariably in a neutral territory to see whether you can have a breakthrough in breaking the ice, so to speak. And how many track 2 events happen in India? Can somebody take a guess? How many track 2 events India does every year? Wild guess. Anybody? 5, 4, is it 8? Last year, based on just the conversations with think tanks, predominantly in Delhi, there have been about 28 track 2 events India has done with different countries. 28. And these are all track 2 events in different countries, and I asked this question also to them, saying, is it all fun and frolic, paid at the government expense to a fancy hotel and in a different country? No, they're actual serious conversations to figure out that the participants who come are invariably, 50% of them are industrialists or businessmen who do trade. Because they understand the consequence of war, they understand consequence of the trade, services, goods getting stuck at the border. And I'm not talking only about India, Pakistan, various skirmishes that happen. So, what does it mean? It means that the political dispensation, not just in India, almost every other country, understands the consequence of war. But the contrarian in me always thinks, and I'm thinking like a corporate CEO, if everything were smooth in my company, what do I do? Do I just go and play golf? Do I just eat? If I sit at home, my wife would think I've lost my job. What do I do? Similarly, take leaders, political leaders. If there is no complexity, if there are no problems, what do you solve? So I have come to one conclusion as a civilian, that political dispensation loves problems. It is like a child playing whack-a-mole game. There's this game where the figures keep popping up. You hit one, the next one will pop up. And India has that problem. You think you have just solved something in south, something else pops up. So this whack-a-mole problem for political leaders, I think, is also becoming great fodder and content for keeping a lot of population busy and active. Because we love it. And we're all patriotic. We're not going to say, oh, come and attack us. But does it solve for problems, economic problems? Not really. A case in point, the largest military industrial complex in the world has been run by the US for decades. It's a big lobby. I mean, apart from the drug lobby and the oil lobby and the tobacco lobby and the pharma lobby, and US is full of lobby. And this particular one is kind of changing shape today. It's not just about weapons anymore. Drones are becoming the new weapon. And what about actual cyber? Do you know how many cyber attacks India goes through every day? Obviously, this data will never be reported. We can't. Only 11% of all internet traffic from India is on the internet. The rest are actually dark web. That's a new cyber warfare. That's where things happen. There you can buy almost anything and everything except mother and father. Everything is available. You want to move goods across supply chain, which are drugs, arms, everything. And what's the mode of payment? Crypto. And now you know why the RBI is against crypto, mainstreaming crypto. It's not about not understanding the youngsters' mind about digital finance. It's about where is it going, terror financing. So what has it got to do with Iran, Israel, India, US? The complexity is only getting worse. US wants to mainstream crypto. What is it going to happen? And US is also tied up with Pakistan now. Trump's own company, by the way, if you all remember, just before his inauguration as a second term president, a week before, he had announced a crypto coin offering, which is now worth $14 billion. He owns 75% of it. And well, for a country which speaks to India as if we don't have governance standards, we have always heard that, right? India needs to improve its governance standard, public governance, corporate governance. Here is a sitting president who raises a crypto coin offering, which is illegal by, according to SEC and Fed, $14 billion, goes and ties a deal with a terror state. I'm using the word terror state as a citizen and not as anybody else. I'm not an expert there. For Pakistan. And what does it mean? So I would worry saying that some of the future warfare would be funded through opaque structures of crypto. I understand the finance side of it, because you can never track it. It's going to be on the dark web. Does it mean Indians don't do it? Of course. I keep getting asked this question, shouldn't Indian government not have a reserve of few lakh bitcoins? And for all the naive questions it sounds, I always tell them, how do you know we already don't have it? We don't have to keep it in our balance sheet. We don't have to keep it in RBI. If I'm fighting counter-terrorism, I don't need to declare to you that I'm holding a purse string. For all you know, we might be having it. Because you cannot buy things on the dark web without some of those. And my worry and the point that I'm making is, in the industrial complex, US is sitting on tons of bitcoins, both on the balance sheet and off the balance sheet. And let's not forget, in US, lobbying is legal. I can go as a industry and sign a check, and I can even claim tax deduction on it. In India, I cannot. Of course, India, we have electoral bonds, that's separate. The next one I want to talk about, very important, is the US military aid to various countries, Iran and Israel, and more so in Israel. We have seen the yo-yos, not just about Trump. Anything that has got to do with energy has always been attacked or attached by the US. And it's no irony or a coincidence that Iran announced one of the largest rare earth production capacity just a couple of months ago. So is that going to be the new oil? Because we keep saying rare earth. Is that going to be the new oil? Probably yes. Because you have an industrial complex which is hungry for electronics and rare earth. The new age warfare, whether it's drones or AI or quantum computing, needs those rare earth. Who's sitting on the largest pie? China. And that is why, if you remember, very, very innocently, China and India, when a couple of months ago, or just a week before Trump took over, Biden in his last week of presidency announced AI chip rules, where 3 categories of countries were classified. There are 15 countries where the US said they can buy any AI chipsets from them, transact without any conditions. The last category, category 3, where there are only 2 countries which needs explicit every time single use approval from the US. That's India and China. And the rest of the countries are in category 2, where they can have almost big conditional approach. Why did it happen? Very simple. China is not a worry here. China kind of, when they saw the sanctions, they've developed their own OS, operating system for computers, and so on and so forth. They're far, far ahead of India in AI and quantum computing. I think that's something that while politically we don't want to agree in open stage, the reality, I can tell you as an industrial person who works in that space, we are far, far lagging behind. And that's a worry that I would have as a citizen. Classic example, the India AI mission and the quantum computing missions budget outlay is less than 7,000 crores over 7 years. That's 1,000 crores a year. And I'll just give you an example. China in the last 7 years, through various measures of sovereign fund and banks, has invested $220 billion in AI and quantum computing. And no wonder China is threatening US. And even without having anybody, India is trying to be what I would call, my concern is, are we shooting more than our worth? Economically, yes, we are the 4th largest economy, but we are by no stretch of imagination better than a lower middle class economy in the world. In parlance, strategic parlance, we are a middle power. We are not a hard power. We are not a supreme power. And if at all anybody, China is kind of getting there along with US. So why is India getting sucked up by all of this? Why is US trying to kind of bully? The last 1 week it's evident. Today we are going to know how much more tariffs Trump would say. I think depending on the quality of sleep, we might know the sleep. Then next week we're also going to hear about, are there going to be special tariffs on AI chipsets? That's going to be a huge strategic impetus. Because where do we import? We don't have the capacity to build it in-house so far. And that's something that we must accept and work towards. So let's come back to Iran and Israel. Iran has tons of rare earth available. That's a reality. And why India is stuck is India is the only country which is friendly and can speak to the political leaders across Iran, Israel, Russia, and Ukraine. Very rare combination. But if we are going to, and I think diplomatically and politically we would continue to be non-aligned. But don't you have to take sides at times? And I think that's a challenge we are going to find politically. Will we take sides? Or will we play this friends with all? If it's, I'm sorry for all the elders here, the phrase the youngsters understand, will we be friends with benefits? I don't know. If India can be friends with benefits, probably we will get somewhere better. But ideologically, if you're going to be friends with everybody, but we will say that, oh, we will not vote in UN, we'll abstain. The same thing comes back at us, right? Whenever we pass any resolution, somebody is blocking our resolution. And I think it's an ideological thing that we'll have to break through politically. What do we want to do? And I understand that we have ties and historic ties with all these 4 countries. And trade, more importantly, we also have trade ties with each of these countries. Suddenly, Tehran is now moving to China. It's adopting Russia's technology for its OS, for its cyber security, and China's OS is what Iran is trying to now adopt. So we are going to see a mixed match saying that enemy's enemy is my friend. And will India be somebody's friend, or will we inadvertently become enemy because of these equations? I think that's a norm that I'm worried about. Let me come specifically to what we call effective deterrence. My worry is, are we going to make it structurally volatile? What is effective deterrence anymore between two nations? Will we fight with each other and our borders shut, and yet we will do trade through a third country? And that's exactly what now US is talking about, India buying Russian oil. India is not going to stop, but I'm glad India actually called out Europe. It bought oil through India, refined it in India, because imagine German winters without oil. And I'm glad India called it out. But that's exactly what I think President Trump was also very annoyed, because we took a stand and called it out. For the first time we called out something, that US and Russia are going through all of this. In all of this, I'm worried about one more country which we don't speak about, North Korea. Because here is a character not many people know. We don't know how he's surviving, because if he's so small, tiny, I mean, he's not tiny, but this country, how is he surviving? Who is funding it? And I think that is where my statement about enemy's enemy is my friend could work out. What is he actually going to do? The Western narrative says millions of North Koreans are starving and near death and all of that. And I have friends, Indians living in Delhi, Bombay, who have actually traveled to North Korea, and as recent as last year, who think that some of the best fine dine restaurants in the world, and these are guys who have traveled around the world, are actually in North Korea. Except for certain defense installation bases where they were not allowed in. They could go anywhere. Of course, people don't speak because of the language issue, or there's also kind of an hierarchy that they see you. The biggest trade, I believe, in North Korea happens via Singapore. Chinese, Malaysians, and Singaporeans trading with North Koreans. So, I think our borders are porous, and again I go back to that. I am a corporate guy. If I were to do a deal, if I had to sell it to you and you and I are not supposed to speak, I will find a third person who can actually sell it to you. We will barter, we will do something. The cost might increase, but we will not stop trade. And I think that is exactly how now governments also will behave. Because you talk about energy security. I'm not even saying security. Energy security first. India needs that oil. Let me give you some statistics on why Iran is important. It's got 17 rare earth elements. So your mobile phones, your chipsets, your quantum computing chipsets will need all of those, are all there. If you're a consumption economy or a power hungry economy like the US, you need that. China is effectively invested through debt diplomacy across the world, especially the African countries, but holds the power to a lot of rare minerals. It also is developing its own technology. The second largest lithium reserve is in Iran now. You need that. So whether you talk about electric cars, whether you talk about clean tech or climate change tools and devices, you would need part of that. So is that going to be the new oil? Probably that's the new oil. In India, we keep thinking data is the new oil. But without your computing power, data doesn't get generated or stored. You need that. So what does this all mean to India economically? Simple, 20% of world's oil and half of world's LNG pass through Strait of Hormuz. In India, 40% of our crude comes through that particular passage, 26 kilometer long. For every $10 increase in oil price, our GDP could slow between 0.3 to 0.5%. That's a straight impact on our GDP. And for those who are very bullish on 2047 that we will be one of the largest economies in the world, good luck. Because we need to be growing at 9% a year every year until 2047. And I say this with conviction. 2022, I launched one of India's first book on public policy on the subject before the phrase Viksit Bharat. My book was called Time for Bharat, where we critiqued 75 years of Indian independence and say that what do we need for the next 25 years. And I go back to the fundamentals of Indian ethos. unless you introspect, unless you question yourself, unless you question every single assumption, bullishness won't solve for it. And I'm glad that you have a lecture series on this, because unless we introspect and question, especially hard questions, how will that 8 to 9% growth come from every year? It's a big challenge. IT services, we are seeing salaries being stagnant, right, for years. And every time IT company says we are going to sack people, we all say, oh no, you can't. It becomes a political news. But the reality is, if today my chat GPT can do coding better, if my chat GPT can probably even write some of your research report better, you have to learn more, faster. And I think that's the intent. So what does it mean for all of us with this work? Because we cannot afford any more slowdowns. But realistically speaking, today geopolitics, it's almost like driving in India. You think you're the safest driver, you think you're sitting in the safest car in the world. But there'll be some cow from somewhere which will come and hit you. Some cyclist will come from out of nowhere. And Indian pedestrians are Usain Bolt's cousins. They see a car, that's when they start sprinting and you'll brake. Correct? Geopolitics is no different. You think everything is fine, everything is sorted, we are growing. Something happens. Who would have thought of this attack? Who would have thought of Trump tariffs on India, especially after all the bromance that we have had with them? So I think we have to be cautious. I mean, very fact that an hour ago, Reserve Bank decided to keep the rates as it is. But it's going to be very tricky next 2-3 quarters. If the war continues, we all thought Russia-Ukraine war will be done in 2 weeks, 2 years, still going on.
3 years. 3 years, 4 years.
And we don't know what's going to happen at all. So I think it's the same whack-a-mole problem. Somebody somewhere does something. What does it mean to India? Very simple. The insurance for an oil tanker, just as an example, every time there's an incident, I'm quoting a recent number, what was a $50,000 for a super tanker to bring oil, now the insurance has moved to $185,000, 4 times. $185,000 is the insurance. It's all going to get added to the landed cost. You and I are going to pay for all the fuel. So while for energy security we'll have to pay for it, it will also have a cost in our inflation. We are a consumption economy. 2/3 of Indians are less than 35. Great demographic dividend we have, I think, done to death so far. And I'm a little cynical about it. Very simple. If you look at the Indian savings rate in the last 10 years, has dropped from 38% to 26%. Because how many of you, the youngsters below 24, eat out once a week? At least once a week. How many of you eat out once a week? Order Swiggy, Zomato, canteen, movies, popcorn. Okay? So keep your hands up, because I'll tell you to put the hand down. How many of you will know how to cook? That's surprising. If you know how to cook, why are you eating out? Because you are not earning. And I'm asking a very simple question. I would have been shot by my daughters if I asked the question. The point I'm making is very simple. We are a consumption economy, which means you are not saving. And what I call as the India risk factor 2040, the year 2040, our demographic shift, we start aging. We are no more going to be the young global population. Humans are living longer. The average, of course, we will know more of these data precisely when we actually do the census. That's another political beast by itself. What does it mean? The last data that we have, and what, if I take the insurance mortality rate tables that LIC of India issues, 72 years is the average life expectancy today. Well, I don't believe that number, because I believe that number has now moved to 83, 84. Within our family and friends, we are seeing people living beyond that as well. So which means you are going to retire at 60, if at all you get a job. And I hope I scare you enough. If at all you have a job, you will retire at 60. And you should have saved enough wealth that it will last you till you're 85 or 90. Let's take average inflation of 3%. And those who understand math, do your own math. How much of money do you need to save to retain your lifestyle? Because the cost of services, when I say services, vehicle, public transportation, insurance, medical, and I'm adding food inflation, is about 20% a year in India. And now if you think why India is worried about any war in the world, it is precisely because of that. Every single number, percentage number that hurts our Indian GDP, hurts your future. It is actually a very political decision to involve itself in everything. And under large one, anything that happens in the entire vicinity of the Gulf region or Gulf Cooperation Council region, we have a huge Indian diaspora. And that's the same fear India has about the US as well. Huge Indian diaspora. And these are all big remittance markets, which means that those diaspora are actually remitting money back to the country every single month. So your part of your GDP has that wealth coming back in. And if you don't remember, Trump has proposed 5% tax on some of these remittances as well. And I think it's a very fair game. I mean, a lot of you will troll me if I had said this on Twitter. Every country has to look out for itself. I think that's the world way today. I cannot be saying, oh, he's my brother from another mother. Sounds nice on social media. But countries don't run like that anymore. Which means they're going to tax people. And that's what I come to Trump tariffs. And I call it the great power leverage. He's hurting where it really pains a lot. Money. And I think he's understood that. You want arms, you need money for it. How many of you understand the concept of buy now, pay later? Pay whatever and convert to EMI, or take money from a friend or parent and payable when able. I think the original proponent of this has been the US. US and Russia. Every single arms deal has been buy now, pay later. They structured the payment package in a way that you buy $20 billion worth of goods, arms from me, and pay it over many, many years. It's about actually finding, and by the way, that all that cost of delayed interest is all factored into the price. It's a reality. And nowadays, there is also another challenge when you buy anything that's arms and ammunition or technology, because I can always make it slower at the back end. If you remember, there's something called software. Your phone, you buy an Apple phone or any device. If you don't keep upgrading the iOS, after 3 years, it's redundant. You can't use it at all. Very similar are arms today. If I don't give you the IP or the source code, I can sell it to you, but I can shut it at the background. I always shudder. In the future, what if we are flying whichever country's technology plane that we fly, and the country says, I'm going to turn it off? What happens to us? It sounds like a science fiction, but well, it might be true in reality in the next few years. Mid-air, I can turn it off. It need not be about fuel. The software just gets shut. And I think that's the reason why one of the sovereign needs that we will have is to work on technological IP. And I'm a big proponent that India has to work deeper, faster, with a frenzy. Yes, we are doing technological advancement, hardware development with HAL and all of that, not enough. Do we have a single operating software out of India? No. Do we have a homegrown hardware for any computing device? No. Do we have any homegrown chipset for computers? No. Including all this camera, the computers that you run in this college, the computers that the government of India runs, and the data that is saved. It's AWS, Amazon, American company. So all the big tech American firms control every single data and digital pipeline. Yes, I'm very petrified, and I'm glad, in a sense I'm very glad that I'm probably 2/3 of my life down, because the youngsters are going to face it. The pain of what I would call defending sovereignty. So what do I mean by the cyber? I think the modern conflict, including Iran-Israel, is no more just about attacks. It's also about cyber operations. I would estimate very confidently, I don't have the numbers, to think one of the most active cyber warfare would be the capability would be with Israel. A landlocked country has to defend itself from various means, and I think it's a phenomenal one. What happens if the power infrastructure in Pune is taken over by a hacker? And the hacker says, I want 10,000 bitcoins. Sounds like science fiction. We all love it if it happens to LA or New York. What happens to India? What happens if I say that the entire water supply at Tansar Lake in Mumbai, I'm shutting and taking over the grid if you don't pay me 10,000 bitcoins? And I'm not far away from the truth. The reality is it is possible. Because in the Western world, especially in the US, the private utility companies have cyber experts as part of their security teams. In India, we still have not embedded all of these. And that's a risk that we run. We think of risks of institutions, single ones, and all of that. Think of it as shutting down a city. Hijacking the entire, let's say, a control tower of an airport or a station. It sounds scary. And I think we should worry about all of those as well. Information warfare, right? How do you know what you read online, what you read on Twitter is true? Because most of us have become what I call, sorry, pardon my phrase, digital idiots. We get carried away by the phrases and the jargons that come through. Slogans as well. We don't question. And I think that is where I would give credit to Israel. There's a chain of command, they take their security very seriously. I've interacted with some of their banking regulatory professionals. And the way they take that seriously, I work with RBI College of Supervision, so I understand the concept of how India takes its security very, very seriously. Can you imagine 45 lakh crores passes through the UPI pipe in India every day? And the payment happens in less than 1.2 seconds. Next time you make a payment, look at the screen, the app will show you that transaction happens. You try and do this in Europe or US, it is way primitive. The banking system in the Western world is still primitive. And what does it mean for India? Can we bring some of the resilience to all of this to other aspects of digital and cyber security? We cannot, India will need to control its borders. India will need to be friendly with Iran, Israel, Russia and Ukraine for its trade and economic obligations. India cannot say yes only to US. We have long-standing ties with Russia. And we don't know which way Russia is going to swing in the entire Iran, Israel, China game, as I call it. And it'll look like fence sitting. So what should India do? I think India, there are 4 points that I want to make to wrap up. I think this entire Iran-Israel outcome for India's economic strength, we will maintain this diplomatic balance. If I can use the polite word, I think we will be non-aligned. As much as I would want to take sides, we will be non-aligned. We will have to maintain operational ties with both Iran and Israel. We will avoid getting into public postures in their conflict, as India has always done with almost everybody, saying that we will take care of you humanitarianly, but we will not get involved in this. And more importantly, I think it is simply because of energy and trade stability, nothing more. India has one more risk, and which we'll know probably the next couple of days. If the Trump tariffs worsen, will we go out and pick more oil from Iran? Probably yes. Will we pick more oil from Russia? Next week there's a conversation that is happening, government to government. Will we do it? Probably yes. But then again, the bigger challenge is our economic resilience. Can we bear any more oil pricing shocks? As I said, the GDP has a direct correlation to every $10 increase to the oil. And I think the reality is, the last one quarter we have found, the RBI data shows this, that the credit offtake has been very, very minimal. It has actually decreased. It means the sentiments of people and the borrowers and of the corporates to say that we trust everything will be fine and I will go ahead with business, they're not borrowing at all. And in the last 5 years data that I saw with Indian corporates, and I'm talking about Nifty 500 listed entities, about 30% of their expansion in the last 5 years has been outside of India. They're kind of silently de-risking their operations, every single company. And by no sense of imagination, I will call them disloyal to country. I think they're being loyal to their stakeholders. They're diversifying their risks. They're going to other markets, not only depending on India. And I think it is reflecting on the overall slowdown. I think there is a definite economic slowdown that we have faced so far. We have an unemployment rate which oscillates between 2.4% to 7.2%, depending on whose data we believe in. The private sector, the government estimate is 2.4%. CMI data, research data is 7.2% of unemployment. And as somebody who sees recruitments on a daily basis at the board level or the C-suite level, I can tell you that there is definitely a slowdown. It's not only in tech sector, almost across all sectors, there's a slowdown on offtake of people. And I think that's something that probably the placement officer in the campuses will also know how difficult it is getting across people. So the point to the students is this: life is going to be difficult, which means you need to pick up more skill sets, more languages, do something better, deeper, faster than a chat GPT can do. Some of the skill sets that you can do will stand instead. You have under 50 years of career. I mean, if you're going to live till 85, you have under 65 years, right? So pick skill sets, and I think that's going to be India's problem. We have 80 crore Indians who are in productive labor, 15 to 65. But we don't have 80 crore jobs. That's a reality. The number of taxpayers in India are less than 2 crore people. About 6 crore Indians actually file income tax return, ITR, every year, but only 2 crores actually pay any income tax. And what does it mean? It means very simple. The formal sector is actually shrinking over a point in time, and the informal sector is increasing. The gig economy is increasing. By the way, gig economy does not mean only delivery boys, Swiggy, Zomato, no. Gig economy can be today knowledge workers, graphic designers working from home. And I think COVID has kind of told us a new one, right? Work from home, work from anywhere, if at all there is work. I think that's an economic shock India is going through now. So which is why India will watch this Iran, Israel, and Trump tariffs going forward. I think the other one that India is very, very worried is India has also participated with naval deployments in these. And I think while we will never put a price, in India I think I'm very glad we don't put a price for such deployments to French. We will never put a price. But what it also means is anything that is going to affect the sentiment of Indian diaspora in the region will add to an indirect cost. Simple example, during global crisis, the kind of unemployment in the GCC region increased, and a lot of Indians who were expats came back to India. And there was a huge impact in state level inflation because they didn't have money, they were not earning. So what happens if, let's say, 50,000 Indians return from Dubai? I'm just giving a scenario. I mean, this is what risk analysts do. You have to run different scenarios. We cannot afford it. And that's a plan that we still need to be ready with. The other one, there are also, if you read Morgan Stanley one of the prediction is with rare earth cartelization, as they call it. China, Iran, Russia coming together in some form to monopolize rare earth. What happens to price of every single electronic item? And one of the predictions is that the oil prices in that case could spike beyond $120 to a barrel. And if that comes true, we will have to forget 1 to 1.5% of our GDP growth. It will be shaved off every year. We can't afford that. The third point I want to make is what is underrated, probably less spoken, and I think we should speak more about it, is our maritime strength. 7,200 kilometers of coastline. Most of the Indians don't understand the word sea. We don't understand the word beach because we don't see it. And do you know what it means to protect the entire 7,200 kilometers of coastline? And that's what our maritime forces do. That's what our Navy does. That's what our Coast Guard does. And it's time that we understand this, because generally we think of Operation Sankalp and we think India has sent its Navy, deployed. That's not the only thing. We are today, just imagine, all I need is a small 15-meter width to enter the country. The Bombay attacks happened many years ago through that. Somebody slipped through. And that's the kind of corridor that we live in today. The fourth one for me, going forward, is we're all hooked on to digital. So what about technological and industrial self-reliance India has to build? So we will have to deal with both Iran and Israel. We will have to deal with Russia. We will, I'm a proponent that at some point India will also collaborate with China. We might have ideological difference, but we will collaborate with China. Two of us together are 1/3 of world's population. There is nothing called, I tell my Western think tank friends, there is nothing called Asia. There's nothing. You can put two Europeans together, they'll find something common in history. What is common in history between Singaporeans and Indians? Probably except a couple of Tamil communities going back generations. What is common between China and India? So that ideology of Asia itself is so flawed in Western world. So India has to find its new collaborators. You can compete and yet collaborate. You can collaborate and compete. And I think, again, I'm wearing the trade hat. If I were to develop something and I want to monopolize this market, I would even work with my collaborator, my competitor. We might share vendors together. We might develop certain components together. And I think that's a thinking that we must bring to mainstream diplomacy or strategic affairs. Can you collaborate even when you compete for something else? You don't have to sacrifice your sovereignty for it. But for your essential security aspect, can you collaborate? And I think we will have to start thinking with this. And again, the geopolitics of the future won't be shaped by only great powers. I'm a big believer in this. The wars of the future, and wars could be of any type, wars need not be spectacular, grand, all of that. I think they could be with even smaller states with something relevant and significant to the rest of the world. They could be even on, and I famously remember the phrase that Meta, before it was Meta, used to have in their campus. We are the second largest continent in the world. That's what Facebook used to call itself. That is the power of its valuation. It said, I'm the second largest population, everybody is hooked on me, and they spend 58 minutes a day. Ridiculous, right? 5% of your day you're spending on something that's unseen, unknown, intangible. Facebook. Of course, for all the youngsters, Insta Reels, think of it that way. I've been told that if I ever say Facebook, I will seem old. And I can relate to it if I look at the statistics of Facebook's declining consumer base. But why do I mean by it? Today, I think an attack on Facebook or Meta would be far more costlier for the US than an attack on a particular state. Because it is what will it mean is the valuation. New York Stock Exchange valuations will drop. There will be fear and panic on the Wall Street. It is no different from if our stock market crashes 2% one day. You'll have panic. So I think the future of warfare need not be just attacking a country. It could also be attacking one of the most vulnerable but significant entities. It could also be private sector entities. So I'm seeing this as what will it mean? It will simply mean supply chain fractures. It could be data theft. It could be identity theft. All of us very happily give our identity, face, biometric, everybody. If I were your insurance company, if you ever put a selfie and say, I'm going to Goa, I'm going to increase your premium, risk premium for that week. Because you're telling the world, my house is empty. You can come and rob it. My car is left at home, you can rob it. And that's how risk managers in private sector think. If you have seen the ACO insurance ad, they're running a recent campaign, I just saw it yesterday, where they're saying that if you don't have any traffic penalties on your car number, they will give you a discount on the insurance premium. Which means they're telling you to be a safe driver or a responsible driver. It's no different from health insurance companies telling you that if you walk 10,000 steps every day, your premium is lower, but we're all Indians, right? We will give it to somebody and say, can you walk? They have not understood us very well. So I think this century is very interesting. And we are 1/4 down this century. The 3/4 is the worrying part. Because the 3/4 will bring lot of digital, lot of data, and warfares can move to that spec. And it will. So what is the lesson that we have? I think very clear. I'll simply end it with an acronym called MIND. I think India will have clarity of mind. To me, that mind is maritime strength, innovation and technology, national resilience. And national resilience, I don't mean phrases, political slogans, none of it. But I think the way we will decide how we act against a Trump tariff is also national resilience. Can we afford to go through short-term pain to say no to Trump? Probably we'll figure out. And the last one is diplomatic balance. So maritime strength, innovation and technology, national resilience, and diplomatic balance. The diplomatic balance is the art of keeping friends closer, enemies much closer, and more importantly, ability to agree to disagree. I think that's a very big strength Indian diplomacy has. And I think if we keep our mind sharp, our purpose steady, without losing focus on that we still need to come out of our lower middle income per capita society to a middle class society. And I think the youngsters here might see it when they retire. Probably we will get to that level. Not before. It will be a miracle to have it before, for the simple fact, if you do the math, our population, everything that we do, our numerator, 140 crores, changes everything. The moment you add 140 crore, everything gets skewed. And that number is only adding, changing. I believe somebody told me that as of last month, it's 144 crores already. And this is despite the fact that population growth rate has dropped. What is known as the replacement fertility rate is growing down. Simple case in point, 1980s, the second largest advertiser on Doordarshan was a national campaign run by the government of India, Hum Do Hamare Do. The 8th largest advertiser today in Times of India, All India, are the IVF centers. 40 years, there's a huge drop in fertility rate. Something has changed. And there's an actual reason, science and cause and effect of it completely. Why am I saying this is very simple. Nations will have to become protectionist for their own benefit, for their own citizens. India will continue what others will call us as cap on the wall, being on the fence. But I think the entire Iran, Israel, Russia, Ukraine conflicts, India will remain as it is today. And we don't have a choice. Because we will have to balance our trade, we will have to balance our energy security, and we have never gone fighting anybody else for getting their piece of property, land, oil, nothing. We've never done that. The last 200 years, India has never gone to war, any of those. US has gone to war almost every 2 decades for its energy security. And of course, because of the Bretton Woods institution, dollar has become the reserve currency. And that is exactly why US is also rattled by saying if BRICS currency comes into being, what happens to the US dollar? And of course, a lot of economists think it will take another 20 years before that actually happens. Probably yes. So with that, again I remind you that I think the MIND acronym that I think is going to define Indian position in this entire Iran-Israel war. Maritime strength, innovation and technology. We will buy technology, collaborate with everybody because we need it. The national resilience and our diplomatic balance. So thank you so much. Happy to take questions.